Have you ever promised yourself, tomorrow I'll change my life, but tomorrow keeps looking exactly the same? You wake up tired, you go to work, you come back exhausted, and deep inside, you start believing that maybe this is all life will ever be. But what if the problem is not your job, not your money, not even your luck? What if the real problem is the hours you are wasting while the rest of the world sleeps? This is the story of a man who was invisible to everyone around him, a man so poor that even his dreams started feeling expensive, until one morning at 5 a.m. changed everything. And trust me, what happened after that was not easy. In a crowded industrial city, where smoke covered the sky every morning, lived a 29-year-old man named Daniel. Daniel worked at a small delivery warehouse on the edge of town. Every day, his shift started before sunrise and ended after sunset. 12 hours, sometimes 14, loading boxes, driving old delivery trucks, cleaning storage rooms nobody cared about. By the time he returned home, his body felt dead. His apartment was tiny, one weak fan, a broken chair, a mattress on the floor. Sometimes, the electricity stopped in the middle of the night, and Daniel would lie awake in the heat, staring at the ceiling, wondering how his life became this small. But the worst pain was not being poor. It was feeling left behind. Every morning, while delivering packages to office buildings, Daniel saw men wearing clean suits, walking confidently with coffee in their hands, young people discussing business ideas, students talking about their future, and every time, a painful thought entered his mind. They're moving forward, and I'm stuck. Daniel had tried to improve his life before, many times. He downloaded online courses, bought cheap notebooks, watched motivational videos late at night. But after working exhausting shifts, he always quit after a few days. Not because he was lazy, because he was tired. Very tired, and slowly, that exhaustion started turning into hopelessness. One night, after returning home from work, Daniel opened his fridge. Inside, there was only a half-empty water bottle and 2 old eggs. That was all. He sat silently on the floor, and for the first time in years, he felt fear. Real fear. Not fear of failure. Fear that his life would never change. Then something happened that made everything worse. The next afternoon, Daniel received a call from his younger sister. Her voice was shaking. "Daniel, it's Mom." His heart stopped. She collapsed at work. For a moment, Daniel couldn't even breathe. Their mother worked in a small clothing factory outside the city. Long hours, low salary, constant exhaustion. Just like him. Daniel rushed to the hospital immediately. The entire bus ride, his mind tortured him. What if something happens to her? What if I lose her before I can give her a better life? When he arrived, his mother was lying weakly in a hospital bed. Her face looked pale, older than he remembered. The doctor explained quietly, "She's suffering from exhaustion, stress, and poor nutrition." Daniel lowered his eyes because he understood exactly what that meant. Poverty. That night, after his mother fell asleep, Daniel sat alone outside the hospital. The streets were silent. Cold wind moved through the empty road. Then he looked at the time. 4:57 a.m. The city was asleep, but something felt different. For the first time in years, Daniel noticed how peaceful the early morning felt. No noise, no traffic, no pressure, just silence. And standing there alone, he whispered something to himself. "I can't live like this anymore." Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. And that quiet sentence became the beginning of everything. The next morning, Daniel didn't go home immediately after leaving the hospital. Instead, he walked slowly through the quiet streets, trying to clear his mind. The sky was still dark blue. Streetlights flickered weakly. A few buses moved through empty roads. Shop owners were just beginning to open their stores. And for the first time, Daniel noticed something strange. While most people were asleep, a small group of people were already awake. Joggers, bakery workers, business owners opening their shops early. People moving with purpose. It felt like an entirely different world, one he had never seen before. Then his attention stopped on an old man, sitting alone outside a tiny coffee stand. The man looked calm, well-dressed, focused. In front of him was a notebook filled with plans and numbers. Daniel ordered the cheapest coffee he could afford and sat nearby. A few minutes later, and the old man suddenly looked at him and smiled. "You look tired." Daniel laughed quietly. "Tired is my normal state." The old man closed his notebook. "That's dangerous." Daniel frowned slightly. "What is?" "Living so long in survival mode that exhaustion starts feeling normal." Those words hit him harder than expected, because deep inside, Daniel knew it was true. The old man introduced himself as Victor. He owned 2 small grocery stores in the city, nothing huge, but enough to live comfortably, enough to escape survival. Victor studied Daniel carefully. "You work long hours." Daniel nodded. "Warehouse delivery. And your future?" Daniel stayed silent, because he didn't know how to answer. Victor leaned back slowly. "You know what keeps most poor people trapped?" Daniel expected him to say, "No education," or "No opportunities." But Victor shook his head. "No control over their mornings." Daniel looked confused. Victor smiled slightly. "Most people wake up already behind." Daniel listened quietly, and for some reason, he couldn't stop listening. Victor pointed toward the empty streets. "These hours are the most valuable hours of the entire day. No distractions, no chaos, no noise. Just focus." Then he asked Daniel a question. "What do you normally do after work?" Daniel answered honestly. "Eat something, scroll on my phone, sleep." Victor nodded slowly. "Exactly what keeps you trapped." Daniel lowered his eyes, because once again, he knew it was true. Victor opened his notebook and wrote something down. Then he pushed it toward Daniel. On the paper were only 3 lines. 5 a.m. Wake up 5 or 6. Learn 6 to 7. Build yourself. Daniel stared at it. "That's it?" Victor smiled. "That's enough to change a life." Daniel almost laughed. "Wake up early? That sounded too simple, too unrealistic, too small to change anything." Victor noticed the doubt on his face immediately. "You think successful lives change in one giant moment. They don't. They change in small hours nobody sees." Then Victor pointed at Daniel's tired hands. "You already know how to work hard. That's not your problem. Your problem is all your energy goes into surviving." Those words stayed in Daniel's mind, because nobody had ever explained his life so clearly before. Before leaving, Victor gave Daniel one final warning. "The first week will feel impossible. Your body will hate you. Your mind will create excuses. You will want to quit." He leaned closer. "But if you survive the first 30 days, you will never see life the same way again." Then he stood up quietly and left. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep properly. Victor's words kept repeating inside his head. No control over their mornings. At 4:58 a.m., his alarm rang. For a few seconds, he stared at the ceiling. Every part of his body wanted to sleep again. His muscles hurt, his eyes burned, his mind whispered, "Start tomorrow instead." But then, he remembered his mother lying weak in that hospital bed, and something inside him snapped. Daniel threw the blanket aside, stood up, and walked toward the bathroom. Cold water hit his face. His body hated it. But deep inside, for the first time in years, he felt something dangerous. Hope. At exactly 5:17 a.m., Daniel sat alone at his tiny table. Old laptop, weak internet connection, cheap notebook beside him. Outside, the world was still asleep. And inside that silent apartment, Daniel opened his first free online course. Not because he felt motivated, not because he suddenly became confident, but because he was tired of staying the same. The first few mornings were brutal. Sometimes he almost fell asleep while studying. Sometimes he understood nothing. Sometimes frustration made him slam the laptop shut. One morning, after only 4 days, Daniel nearly quit completely. He stared at the clock. 5:42 a.m. and a painful thought entered his mind. What if this changes nothing? That question haunted him, because deep down, he was terrified. Terrified of trying again, and failing again. But what happened on day 12 changed everything. Day 12 started like every other morning. Dark room, cold air, painfully tired body. Daniel sat at his small table, staring blankly at the laptop screen. Nothing was making sense anymore. The lessons felt difficult, the progress felt slow, and his life still looked exactly the same. For a moment, he almost closed the laptop, almost gave up. Then his phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. "Your mother is recovering well." Daniel stared at the message silently, and suddenly always something hit him. Hard. His mother had spent her entire life working until her body collapsed, and now, without realizing it, he was becoming exactly the same person. Working, surviving, repeating, until one day his own body would break too. That thought terrified him, because for the first time, Daniel realized something painful. Hard work alone does not change a life. Direction does. That morning, instead of quitting, Daniel studied harder. Not perfectly, not confidently, but desperately. And desperation became discipline. Weeks passed. Then something strange started happening. The mornings became easier, his mind felt clearer, his body felt lighter, his thoughts became sharper. For the first time in years, Daniel stopped feeling like a victim of life and started feeling responsible for it. At 5 a.m., while the city slept, Daniel was quietly rebuilding himself. 1 hour learning business software, 1 hour exercising, reading, and planning. Day after day, no applause, no motivation speeches, no instant success. Just repetition, again, and again, and again. Then one afternoon at work, something unexpected happened. The warehouse manager was angry, several delivery records were missing, orders were delayed, employees blamed each other. The entire office felt chaotic. Daniel looked at the messy paperwork scattered across the desk and hesitated. Then slowly he said, "I think I can organize this." The manager looked at him in surprise. "You?" Daniel nodded nervously. That night, after everyone left, Daniel stayed behind. For 5 straight hours, he used everything he had been learning during those early mornings. Spreadsheets, tracking systems, inventory organization. By sunrise, the entire warehouse system looked different, cleaner, faster, professional. The next morning, the manager stared at the screen in disbelief. "You made this?" Daniel nodded quietly. For a moment, the manager said nothing. Then finally, "Why are you wasting your life carrying boxes?" That sentence changed everything. 2 weeks later, Daniel was moved from warehouse labor into the operations office. Better schedule, better salary, real growth opportunity. For the first time in years, and he could breathe without fear. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It was who he had become. 3 months later, Daniel visited his mother again. This time, he wasn't wearing worn-out clothes, he wasn't exhausted. And for the first time, his eyes carried something they had never carried before. Confidence. His mother smiled softly. "You look different." Daniel smiled back. "I finally stopped surviving." 1 year later, Daniel had become operations supervisor for the company. He rented a better apartment, paid for his mother's treatment, started saving money, and every single morning his alarm still rang at 5 a.m. Not because he had to, because he understood something most people never do. Your future is built in the hours nobody sees. Listen carefully. Most people think success comes from luck, talent, connections. But often, success begins with something much smaller. A decision. A painful, difficult, uncomfortable decision. To stop wasting your mornings. Because every morning you wake up late, someone else is waking up early, learning, building, improving, while you stay the same. And 5 years later, people will call them lucky. The truth is, your life rarely changes overnight. It changes quietly, at 5 a.m., when nobody is watching, when your excuses are strongest, when your future is asking one simple question: are you serious this time? So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself honestly, how much longer will I live like this? And tomorrow morning, when that alarm rings, remember Daniel. Remember the exhausted man who thought his life was over, until he changed 2 hours of his day, because maybe the version of you you've been waiting for is also waiting on the other side of that alarm clock. And if this story connected with you, don't just watch it and move on. Take action. Comment below. 5 a.m. starts tomorrow. I'll be reading the comments. And if you're serious about changing your mindset, discipline, and future, subscribe to Mindset Tales Studio for more powerful stories that don't just motivate you. They transform the way you think. Remember, success is not built in comfort, it's built in consistency. See you at 5 a.m.